Welcome, friends of the Crawford, on a CorkAbout on the Eve of St Agnes. And where else would you find us on the Eve of St Agnes but in Harry Clarke's Phantoms Phantasies with none other than our curator, Michael Waldron. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm great, thank you, Michelle. Wonderful to be surrounded by this magic.
And I'm remembering the story. We're here with Madeline, beautifully illustrated next to us, and Porphyro. And I just wanted to remind our listeners a little bit. Will you tell us a little bit about the story behind the watercolours that we're here with today?
Well, I suppose the series of watercolours here tell a story, right? And that story is taken from a poem by John Keats, which is called The Eve of St Agnes. It was written in 1819 and published in 1820, so it's just over 200 years old. And it is a sort of a long romantic poem, so stanza after stanza after stanza. And, you know, people know his Ode on a Grecian Urn and so on. And this is a really kind of romantic tale taken from the medieval past. And the idea is that on the Eve of St Agnes, so the night before the feast day of St Agnes, which is the 20th of January, a young woman, in this case virginal, can observe certain rituals, pray, prepare themselves, and go to sleep, kind of thinking of their dream lover. And if they've done everything right, they should wake up and their wish comes true.
And there's a few different interesting rituals that I've heard of to do with cake and to do with yes, do you want to tell us a little bit about them?
I don't know anything about this. But there are certain observances, and they do range from, the food to preparing your body, preparing your mind. So it's quite intentional, it's meditative, and I suppose it captured John Keats' imagination. There's something kind of swoonful about it. It is of its time, I think, and the story that we follow in these watercolours is kind of, I suppose, Harry Clarke's highlights, if you will, as if he was taking the highlights from the poem and illustrating them. Now, these are preparatory studies. They were designed, I suppose, with a stained glass window in mind, and that's in the Hugh Lane Gallery in Dublin. But what we have here tells that story of Madeline preparing herself, and then Porphyro, as we've mentioned, and he is from another house. It's kind of Romeo and Juliet, a bit, without the tragic ending. And I suppose he comes to her in the night, and they whisk themselves away into the wintry landscape.
It is like the Romeo and Juliet, I suppose, because he took a few chances. This was not a house of which there was an open door for him.
He was not welcome. Now, he was from a house across the moors, and essentially the wrong side of the tracks. Now, whether that is because he comes from, no background, or whether he comes from the wrong background, I can't quite remember. But it's important to know that there's a sort of a break between the families. And so Porphyro coming to Madeline is sort of breaking that, I suppose, construction of the families being at loggerheads. And I suppose this kind of is the perfect example that love triumphs over all else. So it's sweet. We might, in the Me Too era, think some of this is a bit off, a little bit odd, but throughout, Harry Clarke is very careful in his imagining, the visual imagining of this poem, that there seems to be a unity between the couple. So they're depicted sort of in harmony with each other, and that's, I think, very essential.
And even though it's a story of love and love conquering all, with an awful lot of Harry's works, there is an underside to it, And the story of St Agnes herself very much tragically brings that. So Harry still incorporated that very much through the runnings into one of the pieces, this particular one, the rondel at the end.
Yeah, so I suppose who was St Agnes? Well, St Agnes of Rome was a Christian martyr. She was martyred, we think, at around the age of 13, about 1700 years ago. So such a long time ago. But around her sort of figure, there kind of a sort of a, for want of a better word, a cult following began, and people started to pray to her, particularly because her story involves sexual assault at such a young age, and so therefore she became a sort of a protectress that you could pray to her, and she, and intercede on your behalf. She would essentially protect young women, or virgins as they might have been called, women who are preparing to be married, rape victims, and that whole range of people women in vulnerable positions, particularly down through history. So Agnes was this sort of emblem, and if you prayed to her, she would look after you.
Well, thank you for filling us in on the backstory to what's going on here. We're really looking forward to being able to get one of your own friends' pod tours, which is happening on Valentine's Day, friends. And in the meantime, do come in, have a look upstairs onto the third floor. Second floor. Sorry, I've invented a whole new floor. And this is what happens when you walk through the magic and fantasy land of Harry Potter.
Be in the clouds.
Thank you very much for your time today, Mike, and we're really looking forward to Valentine's Day and to being in this space with you and Madeline and Porphyro for Valentine's Day. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Michelle.